Hello Year 5 and welcome to your history lesson for today. So we're going to be looking at the beliefs of the Maya people. So we're going to look a little bit about the religion, the gods, what type of festivals they might have they got any religious quirks that they do. So by the end of the lesson, okay, you need to be able to explain the religious beliefs. Okay, so we're going to look at the gods, look at the temples, look at the different priests that they had. And then you need to understand how they worshipped gods. There were lots of different things they did to show their loyalty to their gods. Some of them are a little bit more disgusting than I think you'd wish them to be, but we'll find out about those. I can identify different religious festivals. We're going to look at the different celebrations that the Maya had during their religious seasons. You need to be able to explain what happens in a Mayan ritual. Okay, so we're going to show you some different examples of what happens during a ritual. So, religion within the Mayan culture was a very integral part. So when we say something's integral, it's very important. It's right at the centre. Okay, and it's almost like that central part that controls a society, a civilization. And it was intertwined with other aspects of society. And we looked at intertwined in our reading lesson or English lesson the other day. So it's almost like intertwined and then it meshes together. It's all woven in with other aspects. It's not just in one particular part. It moves out into different aspects of their living life. Now, they believed and worshipped in a number of different gods, okay? And they believed that the gods had a good side and a bad side, and that they could either help them or the gods could hurt them, okay? So it's almost like that difference between good and evil, okay? And it links a little bit to our PDW topic we looked at about making good and bad choices and whether there were consequences to those choices. So they would dance, they would sing, and sometimes they would make offerings of blood to the gods, okay, and that was to demonstrate their respect and loyalty, okay. So that's something we're going to look at a little bit further today. That's not something that many traditional religions do nowadays, but that was something that was very relevant and very popular in those times. So because we know that religion was very important, it affects everything they do. All aspects of their normal life were affected by their religious beliefs, okay? Now, because they believed in lots of different nature gods, okay, that has an impact on sort of their living styles, what they ate, how they farmed, how they grew crops. And they believed that in lots of different nature gods, those gods ruled people's lives and their decisions. So they've got the gods of maize, and we know that maize was one of the fundamental ingredients for a lot of their food that they used to eat. And they've also got the gods of sun and fire. Okay, so the sun obviously provides them with heat and with light, and fire provides them with that opportunity for heat as well as almost like being able to cook things. Okay, now here we can see a stone carving. Okay, this is a stone carving of Kinich Au. Okay, and he is the sun god. Okay, so they worshipped different elements of their lives effectively. So you had the god of the sun, you had the god of the moon, god of the wind, earth, fire. So all of the different elements of the world. Now, there are many Mayan gods, okay? And I'm not going to go through them all with you today because we will be here forever. And quite frankly, 98% of them I don't think I even can pronounce. Despite Googling how to say them, it's completely gone in one ear and out the other. But one thing we do know, one thing we can look at today is when researchers actually first started studying the Maya, they labelled their gods using the alphabet, okay? So God would be God A, God B, God C. I wonder if you know why they do that, okay? That's a question I want you to bear in mind. And you might have to go and research that one after the lesson. See if you can come back and tell me the answer to that question, because it's quite interesting. Now, obviously, before the hieroglyphics were translated, because obviously they had an epigrapher who had to go and translate all the different hieroglyphs and the pictures to try and understand the Mayan language, no one knew what the names of the gods were, okay? So that is the reason why, okay, so I've now beaten you to it if you haven't researched it already. They had to label them with the letters of the alphabet to identify each one. So once the hieroglyphs had then been translated, they were actually then able to name the gods as they were called by the Maya. So when they translated the alphabet, they were able to work out who was who. So this is a statue here of the god El. Okay, so before they'd identify what the hieroglyphs were, they identified him as god El. And he was later identified as Chuk, who is the god of rain. Okay, very interesting ideas of what they thought their gods might look like. Very interesting. Now we have God D, and this was later translated as Itzamna, and she or he was the god of agriculture and education. Okay, now agriculture, you can see from here, there's could potentially be some basket of crops here. Okay, so the idea of agriculture is like the land, the farming. So it could be the grazing of your animals, it could be the development or the growing of your crops, and the food that you grow, the fruits and the maize and the corn. And obviously then the god of education, obviously we know that it was only rich boys that would be able to go to school, but they had a god that they worshipped and looked up to. Now, Mayan lives revolved around the religion, like we've already said. They had special ceremonies. So they had ceremonies and rituals to honour their gods. And they'd go and ask for blessings, which is very similar to a lot of our traditional religions and faiths that we have nowadays. You go to church, you go to mosque, you go and you ask for a blessing. Now, people gave gifts to the gods, such as flowers. Okay, and the most popular flower they had was a marigold. Marigolds are like an orangey yellow flower, very big, very voluminous. Or they'd offer maize and gold. Now, obviously, they'd offer maize because maize for them, being part of, having the god of maize, okay, that's a gift that's been given to them, so they're giving that gift back. And that was effectively food for them. And they'd have gold if they had the riches, and they'd go to show their thanks, to keep the gods happy. And that's because, like I said at the beginning, okay, the gods can either be good or bad. And I'm assuming that was based on the idea of whether you're good or you're bad towards them. Okay, and effectively you'd suffer a consequence. Now, their ceremonies took place in temples. Now, the temples tend to be in the cities. Okay, so here you can see a picture of one of the temples. Very grand, very big, and always built in almost like a pyramid shape with the steps. Now, offerings were thrown into what's called holy water holes called cenotes. Okay, so it's almost like they're tunnels that are dug into the ground through the temples, and that's where your offerings, okay, so your gifts that you've brought along are then put, because it's the idea of that they go through the centre of the earth, okay, and they're then taken into the underworld. Okay, so looking at the religious rituals, the Maya people performed many different religious rituals. Okay, now most of these rituals were actually performed during festivals or those special ceremonies, and it was a way of appealing to the gods. It was almost like to get their attention. So we've got three different things here. Okay, we've got bloodletting, playing a ball game, and priests wearing masks and costumes. What I want you to do is I want you to pause the video. Do you think you can link each ritual to the reason as to why, so the purpose of them? Okay, so if you sat with someone at school, you've got someone at home, you can bounce ideas or have a conversation and look at the three different purposes here and see if you can match which one might be represented by the specific ritual. Okay, pause the video and see if you can have a go. Okay, so let's have a look and go through these answers. So bloodletting is actually to nourish the gods. So it's almost feeding them your blood of all that goodness and richness and holiness that's in your body. And you're nourishing the gods, you're giving it to them. Now, playing a ball game is to represent the battle. Okay, when you play a game, you tend to have an opposition. It's usually more than one team against the other. And it's the idea of that battle between the gods. Gods fight. Okay, you've all seen the Avengers. Okay, you've all seen Thor, god of lightning, and god of thunder, and his brother. They are always constantly fighting. Okay, all the different guardians of the galaxies are fighting. Okay, and the same thing goes for the gods from the Mayan culture as well. So that means that the priests here are scaring away demons. Okay, keeping it to that the faith theme. Okay, of their religion. Okay, the idea of those extensive headdresses that can be quite prominent, quite bright, is to scare the demons away. Now, as well as gifts, the Maya believed that they had to offer blood sacrifices to the god. And this is the one that we've just looked at about the blood giving. And they believed that if they didn't, the sun wouldn't rise and the world would end. Okay, so they believed, unlike science, which we know today, in that we see the sun within 24 hours because we rotate on our axis and we see the sun, they didn't understand the idea of the science and the planets and the solar systems. They hadn't quite yet got that far when they looked at the astronomy of the stars. So they believed that if they didn't do it, the sun wouldn't come up. And if the sun didn't come up, that would be the end of the world. Now, blood sacrifices could be given in many ways. Okay, now rulers, for example, so kings or queens or the royals of the city or town, would pull spiky ropes through their tongue. So they would pierce their tongue with a spiky rope and they would pull it through in the hope that it would then make them bleed. Or they'd use their fingernails. Okay, so fingernails would then be pulled from slaves or captives. So you imagine if you had your fingernail, if you've ever caught your finger in a door, I've caught my toe before and I took my entire toenail off when I was at school. It bleeds. A lot. Your extremities, your phalanges, your toes and your fingers, they bleed a lot. Okay, so they would either sacrifice themselves and take the blood from themselves, or they would use slaves and captives and they'd take their fingernails off them and draw the blood from that way. Now here you've got a picture. So this is a stone slab here. Again, this picture shows King Shield Jaguar. Now you can see where he's holding a torch. Again, he's got the flames on the end, which symbolises that light. Now you can see here that his wife, okay, has actually she's got a barbed cord, okay, through her tongue. Okay, so she's got her tongue stuck out just here. And this cord here, you can see it's got the spikes on it here. So she's actually pulling that through her tongue, okay, to then sacrifice that blood. In my opinion, that's pretty disgusting, but also pretty painful. Now, Maya priests were very important in Mayan society, and it was believed that they were the only ones that could communicate directly to the gods. That was their job, that was their gift, and that was their responsibility. So they were responsible for leading the rituals of worship and sacrifice, and it was up to them to waylay that message from the gods. This is what the gods want you to do. So they tell them to plant the crops, or when to do it, how to do it, where to do it, who to marry, who they couldn't marry, and what their sacrifices is that they should give, depending on what their needs are. And other people did all of this. They did all of this because the priest told them to, and because they believed that it was true that the priests had direct contact with the gods. They were the messengers. They were the messengers of God. Okay, so they had to do what the god wanted. Okay, so they had to obey effectively by the laws that he'd set down. Now here you've got a picture of a pot. Okay, and this pot is actually a picture of someone being sacrificed. And when you sacrifice someone, it's almost you give something up in return for something. And here, he's lying on this slab here. He's actually just had his heart pulled out. Oh, it doesn't sound particularly nice. Okay, so other than blood, sometimes they would sacrifice humans and animals, and sometimes it would be specific body parts. Okay, and it's usually organs, and usually it's going to be the heart, because that's the main. Other than your brain, that controls your entire body. Without your heart, your body's not going to live. Okay, you're going to be dead. Now, again, they would tend to use the slaves and the captives from other cities, okay, as sacrifices, because for them, technically, it's then almost a form of punishment. Okay, and their punishment is that they die, but for the good of the city, because they're then sacrificed and they make the gods happy. Now, during festivals, the priests would dance, they'd sing, they'd bang their drums, and they'd make lots of noise, and they'd be prancing around and dancing, wearing very bright clothing and headdresses. Now, you can see here this picture of the headdresses. When we looked at the Mayan lifestyles of what they would wear, they were always made of very exotic feathers, okay, and they'd become from very exotic birds, okay. Now, the ritual dance was thought to scare away the demons, okay. So that idea of performing that dance and that ritual with the fancy clothing and, you know, the abrupt dancing is to scare away the demons, but they'd also demonstrate their power and authority to the gods, because they effectively were the peak. They were in charge. Okay, so I had these two questions, and I wonder what it might like to be if you were a Mayan priest, and I wonder if you might know what people would do, what would happen to people if they ever refused to do what the priest said. So what do you think happened to them if they didn't follow orders? I wonder what their punishment might be. That's an interesting one. Now, the Maya believed in the afterlife, and they believed that there was a heaven and an underworld, okay? So people, when they were sacrificed, went straight to heaven to live with the gods, okay? And if they didn't, they'd go to the underworld. Now, everyone else, including rulers, had to go through the journey to the underworld. It's very dark, very scary. It's almost that idealization of our heaven and our hell, okay? But they had to go through that journey to warrant that worthiness of then going to heaven. Now, there were lots of terrifying gods here in rivers of blood, okay? Not everyone actually then managed to get through this journey and get to heaven, okay? Now, the Mayan people believed that the earth, which they called the middle world, was very large and flat. Okay, and they thought it was resting on the back of this kind of creature like a turtle or a crocodile. Now, on the middle world grew a tree, okay, and the branches reached all the way up to heavens, which obviously is our upper world. And the roots grew all the way down through to the underworld, which was then guarded by the gods of death. Okay, now the Mayan believed that after people died, their souls would travel through a series of different caves or different tunnels, okay, which were known as the place of fear. But the rulers and the noblemen believed there was a chance of them getting to the upper world. So it's almost like, unless you're high up in society, you've got an automatic ticket to go into the upper world. If not, you've got to almost prove your worth. And not everyone manages to survive through that journey. Okay, now Mayan gods were worshipped in different ways, and sometimes they'd have different names and roles, and some of them took on human form. Okay, now historians have discovered a lot about the Mayan gods, but we're not going to look at that too much in depth today because it will get a little bit complicated. So your task for today is you've got the Mayan creation story and you're going to recreate it yourself. Okay, so you're going to create a comic strip and retell the story. I want you to see if you try and get it into 9 different parts. And remember, you only need a 1-sentence summary at the bottom. Okay, so have a go at drawing that out. Include yourself some colourful pictures. And I want you to create me a very nice comic strip to repeat the story. All right, good luck, year 5.